on the COVID vaccine itself and how all this is going to work on younger children. So I want to bring in Dr. Hansa Bhargava. She's a pediatrician and the senior medical director at WebMD. Thank you so much for joining us and being with us.
Glad to be here.
And Dr. Bhargava, I want to start with this one. Is the vaccine safe for children who have pre-existing conditions?
So the vaccine has undergone trials and has been overseen by the FDA. And the FDA has been quite rigorous looking at that data, has taken its time to actually look at it and approve it. So I have kids myself, like you do, and I do think that it's a safe vaccine, and I do intend to get my own kids vaccinated as well.
Okay, when we talk about pre-existing conditions, that can really run the gamut. Everything from, pediatric cancer survivors to kids who have food allergies. My son has a severe peanut allergy, and he's had reactions to that. Kids with asthma. When you weigh all those factors, is it the same sort of safety for all pre-existing conditions, as far as you can tell?
Look, I think that's a really good question. And certainly for the majority of pre-existing conditions, this is a safe vaccine. And in fact, those kids who have pre-existing conditions are also more susceptible to COVID as well, right? We know that of adults, and that is true as well of kids. And so it's very important to get those kids who have underlying conditions the vaccine as soon as possible. Now, if there are any concerns about specifics, such as allergies or allergies to previous vaccines, I would encourage parents to talk to their pediatrician. The pediatrician is a great source of knowledge and can definitely answer your questions about that.
Okay. So basically, you're weighing the risk, obviously balancing that risk with someone with pre-existing conditions actually contracting COVID and what may happen in that instance.
Absolutely. And the data is also showing that in that age group, we are seeing a rise in hospitalizations. Additionally, COVID can cause a very serious condition called MIS-C, and that is something that affects many systems and can really seriously impact the heart and other organs in the body. So we are seeing a rise in hospitalizations. We know we can have serious infections. We don't know who's necessarily going to have those. Certainly kids who have underlying conditions might be more susceptible. So I do think it's a good idea. And lastly, here's the point. Summer's coming and the kids have been locked down and families have too. And as we open up and kids kind of see each other more, the infection is more likely to spread. So I do think it's a really important thing. And I have one more point, I'm so sorry, but I do want to say this. 15 months ago, we looked across the world and we saw that there was infections happening in a country like across the world, and we were worried, but we didn't think it was going to come here. When infections surge, especially COVID-19 in other countries, that means that they're more likely to have variants, and those variants, as we've seen, are global and they can come here. So the vaccine offers protection against variants, and that is the other big reason that I would suggest it.
So in other words, simply because, say, children were just fine back in the fall when the original COVID variant was the primary virus here in North Texas, we've seen even now, I think that's been replaced by the UK variant, and that may be replaced by another variant come fall.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, when COVID has had a chance to surge through different countries, that means there's going to be more likelihood of mutations happening, which will lead to more variants, which could be more contagious and more serious in nature. So we're seeing a spike in hospitalizations. We know there's going to be more variants out there. We want to keep our kids safe.
Now, is the observation time the same for children, say 12, 13 years old, as it is for adults?
The observation time in terms of COVID infection, or I'm sorry, can you clarify for me?
No, after getting the vaccine, after being vaccinated.
Yes, absolutely. The vaccine, the mechanism of action is thought to be the same, where you need a few weeks after you get the vaccine for the immune system to build up and to be fully protected. And of course, initially the vaccine will protect you over 70%, depending on the vaccine. Right now it's Pfizer. And then secondly, after the second vaccine, we are probably going to get to 95%, although the trial in the kids actually said 100%. So the numbers are very good.
Yeah. Are children likely to experience the same side effects after getting their first dose or second?
Well, there were some side effects noted, including some fatigue and some headache, some muscle aches. So I think that there's a small proportion of kids who could have that, but the majority actually did quite well. And so, I do think that most kids will do just fine.
And say, down the road and then over the next several weeks, if your child does get the vaccine, maybe comes down with a fever or has some body aches, how should moms or dads treat them? Is it just sort of a stay at home and keep an eye on them situation?
Great question. Yeah, I think for the majority of people who have those side effects, stay at home and, hydrate, rest, and, of course, call your pediatrician if things are not getting better. But most people have had side effects like those for maybe less than 24 hours, if any at all. And so if you're worried, call your pediatrician, always talk to them. But, I think that most of us will be absolutely fine.
Obviously there are some parents that are concerned with this being a new vaccine. What do you say to them who may be hesitant to get their 12-year-old son or 13-year-old daughter vaccinated?
I'm a parent myself, and I totally understand the thoughtfulness that parents have about their kids. I have the same kind of thoughtfulness as I'm sure you do. I would say that, look, the research that these companies have done, they have been around for many, many years. And that gives me peace. The other thing that gives me peace is that the FDA is very good at looking at these conditions, as the CDC. So I believe that they look at the science very closely and do not take it lightly before approving anything. And lastly, there's millions of people who have had this vaccine already in the United States. And yes, they're not children, but the fact that millions of adults have had this vaccine also gives me some peace of mind. So I would say those three reasons are the reasons that I feel at peace, but you always have to weigh that against what the risk is of not getting the vaccine. And that is, the fact that the kids can get seriously sick, they can be hospitalized, and they can get this other condition. And lastly, yeah, they can spread it to each other. And that's probably more likely to happen in the summer as things open up and they get together, and they should get together, right? We want a semi-normal life for our kids who've been isolated, and there's mental health issues from that. They should absolutely be able to do at least some semi-normal activities, and this is their door to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if your kids are anything like mine, they've been chomping at the bit to get together with friends, more friends, and as often as possible. If you're just joining us again, welcome to our Facebook Live. We're answering your questions and talking through the how this will work with the CDC now authorizing the Pfizer vaccine for children as young as 12. We're speaking with Dr. Hansa Bhargava. She's a pediatrician and the senior medical director at WebMD. If you need to register for the vaccine, I know some of you on our Facebook Live have been commenting, you're looking for information on how to register. You can go to CVS, Walgreens, or WFAA.com/vaccine. That's WFAA.com/vaccine, or just go directly to CVS or Walgreens websites. You can register there to get registered. Again, I want to put up that number as well. You can also text the word vaccine to 214-977-6028. We will send you a complete list of information, including what some of our local school districts are planning in terms of getting the kids vaccinated ahead of the start of summer and obviously the next school year as well. Dr. Bhargava, in trying to get an idea of why some parents may be concerned, a lot of what I've been hearing is not so much parents who are necessarily anti-vaccine. These parents are saying, I get all my vaccines. My child gets a flu shot every year. But they are worried about, I think there was one mother who said, I'm worried about, having that kid who grows up and you get the lawyer commercial 20 years from now. If you receive the COVID vaccine between this year and this year, you may be part of this class action suit, simply because she's worried that this is so new and all of these vaccines have been developed so quickly. What do you say to that?
I think, first of all, I appreciate that mom is thoughtful. I think every parent has a right to be thoughtful about these things. And what I would say, though, is that we lean on science for so many things, right? Like those antibiotics that are given to you for your child's ear infection, or the asthma medications that your child may be using. We lean on science for so many issues in medicine. And that is where we kind of look at the research, we look at the clinical trials, we look at these organizations that do this research. And at some point, we have to say, we do trust these people because they've been doing it for a long time. And moreover, we have regulatory boards like the FDA and CDC that actually oversee them. So I do think that, I understand the questions, but I do think in this case specifically, we can feel better that those regulatory boards are there, and also companies that have done this research for a long time are behind it. And then lastly, we have to also weigh that with the risks of our kids getting sick. I mean, there's thousands of kids that have been hospitalized with this. We know there's increased hospitalizations due to COVID-19, much more than the flu. And, we do know that there's serious long-term effects from COVID-19 as well. So we've got to, as a parent, make those decisions with weighing those risks of a possible issue with a vaccine down the road, which is very, very unlikely given the fact that we have so many safety mechanisms in place, versus the risks of getting COVID, or even the variants that we know are around the world, and there will be probably more. We might be talking a few months later about variants that have come out of different parts of the world because there's so many infections. So I think that we need to, as parents, we need to kind of look at the entire picture and then make a decision for the ultimate safety and wellness of our child.
I know, some moms and dads are concerned about, teenagers' hormones, 13, 14-year-old girls and their hormones and their fertility. Is there any evidence that getting the Pfizer vaccine will impact a woman's future fertility at all?
There's no evidence of that at all. Unfortunately, what we have sometimes is misinformation that gets propagated, on various channels. And unfortunately, it's very hard sometimes for anybody to actually figure out what is real and what's not. But we've got to lean on the science and the facts, and these are rigorous trials that happen. So we've got to trust those facts. And as far as that question particularly, there is no evidence that I know of at this moment of that.
I think that's very important what you just said, because we are bombarded by so much information from all corners. We've got, things that our friends share on their Facebook feed. We're getting alerts on our phone constantly, what we see on TV and in the news and like that. And it does become very, very important to parse out that information and get to the good stuff, so to speak. So that the information that you're internalizing and making decision on is actually sound and based on science.
I totally agree with that. It's what we call the misinformation crisis, and unfortunately, that applies to vaccines, it applies to COVID, it applies to various things. And so we've got to be, as parents specifically, we've got to be very careful and look for that for both. Science is one area where there isn't another side to the story. There isn't an alternative view. It is just science, and science is something that we can trust because we've had a lot of years behind us where we have made huge breakthroughs in medicine, which our parents who might, be older. I mean, my mom's older. She has high blood pressure issues. I trust the medicine she takes. I trust what the doctors tell me about her. And there might be other issues that we ourselves have had. So in health and science, I would encourage strongly to stick to the science. There is no alternate view. Science and facts are the only view.
And I know obviously with this development authorizing the vaccine for children as young as 12, obviously the next question becomes, well, what about the younger children, the elementary school kids, the toddlers? And obviously, and I can tell you last week, Pfizer and BioNTech started dosing the first healthy children in their study, looking at how the vaccine could impact those younger children. I believe they're breaking down into 3 age groups, age 5 to 11, 2 to 5 year olds, and then obviously the last group would be 6 months to 2 years. They started dosing the 5 to 11 year olds last week. Next week they're going to do the 2 year olds to the 5 year olds, and then eventually the younger babies. But based on what we've seen with the 12, 13, 14, and 15 year olds, are you hopeful that the vaccine will be just as effective with the younger children?
Yeah, absolutely. I am very hopeful. And let's just remember that most of the vaccines, the majority are actually given to children, under the age of 12, right? With so many, and you have 3 children as well. And I know the parents are listening, that have children. The kids get so many vaccines in the first year of life and then the first 5 years of life. So, I do think that it's good that these vaccine trials are happening with the children. And I do think that probably more than likely we will have some success. But again, I lean on the science, the clinical trials that will show us the data from that, and then the FDA and the CDC to help us regulate and make final decisions around it.
Do you anticipate that they will keep it to these smaller groups? They did 12 to 15. Do you expect that the next group will be, all kids under the age of 12, or do you think it's going to be these smaller groups, say 5 to 11 years old, and then going step by step to the youngest children?
I think probably it will be in a stepwise fashion, just like this was, first over 16 and over, now 12 to 15. I think that the FDA and the CDC and the expert groups look very carefully and are very thoughtful about their decisions, and I think that's great. So I would suspect that it will be age by age. I'd be really surprised if everyone under the age of 12 all of a sudden gets approved, and that's also because the data is coming in. Even the companies that are doing the trials have initiated in some groups and then did it in a stepwise fashion in terms of younger kids, and I think that's all good. We want to be careful to collect the data. We want to be, very cautious about that, because that gives us confidence on the other end as parents and pediatricians to make sure that our kids are getting the best possible vaccine out there.
And you mentioned the sheer amount of vaccines that younger children get. I remember so many days, sitting in the pediatrician's office with my kids and watching my daughter get 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 shots on the same day. She certainly wasn't happy about it. But is there anything that parents need to take into account with older children and their vaccines? Say if they're getting vaccinated for something else, a 12 or 13-year-old, do they have to space out when they receive the Pfizer vaccine?
That's a great question. I think they should lean on their pediatricians for that. Typically, we don't, we do give vaccines together, and unless there is, less than a few weeks gap, there are guidelines around that. So I would talk to your pediatrician about that. And as far as, getting multiple vaccines at the same time, that's been happening for a very long time, and my kids went through that as well. And I think one thing that the parents could do in the 12 to 15 age group is just, talk about the positives of getting the vaccine, talk about that, how it's not very painful, that it's just a small prick. Set up expectations for that, and then also talk about the benefits that they will be able to be outside without masks, and even in certain indoor gatherings without masks. So, there's a lot of good that's going to come out of this. And honestly, I speak a lot about mental health and resiliency in kids, and from that perspective, I think it's just so terrific that they'll be able to, not be socially isolated anymore and be able to do the activities that they've been aching to do for so long.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking forward a little bit with the timeline that it's taken for each of these stages to be authorized. So if, say, children 5 to 11 years old were given the go-ahead in sometime in, September or so, well, that sort of starts to run up right into the start of when we usually get our flu shots in, early to mid-October. And what it seems to be what you're saying is that shouldn't present any sort of problem if, say, you're getting the COVID vaccine and then getting a flu shot shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we will make decisions on as we get closer to it, and as the kids kind of go through the gate. The younger age groups for the COVID vaccine, I will lean on the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC to make those decisions thoughtfully, but I don't foresee it being a huge problem. And, if there's any questions about, spacing the vaccines, I would advise, the parents to talk to their pediatricians about that, because we are constantly being inundated with up-to-date information and science.
Yeah, and what do you expect if, as these vaccines become available to more and more students? Now we've pretty much now encompassed all of high school and middle school, and at this point, in terms of the children that are eligible to get vaccinated, do you anticipate that this will make school look very different in the fall?
I do think so, actually. Even before the vaccines were approved in this age group, the issues with the school, I think the schools can definitely open up now that the adults are vaccinated, now that we know that, if kids aren't vaccinated, they would have to wear masks. And now that we have some data, there's been some great data out of North Carolina, as well as Wisconsin, with public school systems that have shown that masks do work and kids can be in person in school. So I don't see that there should be that many limitations for schools reopening and for some normal activities to happen. And now we've got the icing on the cake, which is a vaccine for the kids. So that should open up even more doors. So I'm actually, personally, as a parent, I'm really excited, again, both for the summer and the school, because all of these things that we're coming up with, and the vaccine, that's a lot of hard work and research that went into this, and it's really amazing that we have it. So I think that I'm excited, and I think this is all good news, and I hope that the parents see it that way as well.
Yeah, and I just want to end with something you sort of brought up earlier, in that although the specific COVID vaccine is new and was technically developed relatively quickly, the groundwork had been laid for many years in terms of coronavirus vaccines, right?
Absolutely. So, we have the science, and we have the groundwork for coronavirus vaccines, other vaccines. We have been doing this for a very, very long time. And then the authorities are very careful to make sure, they don't want anything bad to happen either. They want this to be as safe as possible. So the fact that we know that we have the foundational science, we have the regulatory bodies to oversee that science, as well as the experts who are the doctors, the American Academy of Pediatrics, are all in agreement, should give the parents a lot of faith that this is good and this will protect their kids and keep them healthy and allow them to get out and be kids.
And that is something I think both the kids and the parents are very much looking forward to. Dr. Bhargava, thank you so much for providing your expertise and that context to help us better understand what this means to our families, and giving us some information to make better informed decisions. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
All right, thank you so much. And again, if you have any questions, you can always text the word vaccine to 214-977-6028. We will send you all the information you need to know about getting registered, as well as what our local school districts have planned in terms of helping to vaccinate the children. Thank you for joining us on this Facebook Live, and we hope to see you later tonight for News 8 at 10. Have a great night, everybody.